The clock had just struck 11:30 p.m. when Marcus Johnson's old but reliable Toyota made its way down the empty highway. The road stretched ahead like a dark ribbon under the cloudy night sky, with only his headlights and the occasional street lamp lighting the way. He was tired after a long day at the engineering firm, where he had spent hours working on designs for new airplane parts. The radio played soft jazz music, helping him stay alert as he drove. Marcus was a big man, not just in height, but also in build, with kind eyes and hands that showed years of both detailed engineering work and helping his dad fix cars in their garage. His dark skin seemed to blend with the night, but his bright yellow safety vest from work made him easily visible, a habit he kept from his years of late-night shifts. As he rounded a bend in the highway, his headlights caught something that made him slow down. About 100 feet ahead, a car sat on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking in a steady rhythm. Marcus could have driven past, like the other cars probably had. It was late, it was dark, and he was tired. But his mother's words echoed in his head, just as they had since he was a child. "Baby, if you can help someone in need, you help them. That's what makes us human." Marcus checked his mirrors and slowly pulled over, positioning his car about 20 feet behind the stopped vehicle. He left his headlights on to provide more light and grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment, another habit his father had taught him. As he stepped out of his car, the cold night air hit his face, helping him feel more awake. The stopped car was a newer model Honda, silver in color with out-of-state plates. As Marcus approached, he could see someone moving around near the front passenger side tire. His flashlight beam revealed a woman, and as she turned to look at him, he could see she was very pregnant, probably in her last few months, he guessed. She was struggling with a tire iron, trying to loosen the lug nuts on what was clearly a flat tire. Her coat was wrapped tightly around her against the cold, and her breath came out in small clouds in the chilly night air. When she saw Marcus approaching, he noticed a brief flash of worry cross her face, something he had seen many times before. A big black man approaching at night often caused that reaction, but Marcus had learned to handle these moments with extra care. He stopped a respectful distance away and held up his hands in a friendly gesture. "Evening, ma'am," he called out in his deep but gentle voice. "Looks like you're having some car trouble. I'm an engineer, and I know my way around cars. Would you like some help?" The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly, but she still kept the tire iron gripped tightly. "My tire blew out about 20 minutes ago," she explained, her voice showing signs of stress and fatigue. "I've been trying to change it, but these nuts won't budge." Marcus nodded understandingly. Those lug nuts can be really tough, especially if they were put on with an impact wrench. "Would you mind if I took a look? I promise I just want to help." He pulled out his work ID from his pocket, letting the light catch it. "I'm Marcus Johnson. I work at Wright Engineering down in the city." The woman looked at his ID, then at his kind face and yellow safety vest, and finally at her own tired hands. After a moment, she nodded and stepped back. "Thank you," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I'm Emma. I've been trying to reach my husband, but there's no cell service out here." As Marcus knelt down to examine the flat tire, he noticed the woman was shivering. "Ma'am, if you'd like, you can wait in your car where it's warmer. I'll have this changed in about 10 minutes." He smiled reassuringly. "I used to do this with my dad all the time in his auto shop." The night was quiet except for the soft sounds of traffic in the distance and the clicking of the hazard lights. Marcus worked efficiently, his strong hands making quick work of what had been an impossible task for Emma. As he worked, he hummed quietly to himself, an old habit that helped him focus and made the situation feel less awkward. While Marcus worked on changing the tire, Emma stayed in her car as he had suggested, but kept watching him through the side mirror. The way he handled the tools showed years of experience, his movements smooth and sure even in the dim light. The highway remained quiet except for the occasional passing car their headlights briefly illuminating the scene before disappearing into the night. After a few minutes, Emma rolled down her window. "Would you like some water?" she called out. "I have an extra bottle in my bag." Marcus looked up from his work and smiled, wiping some sweat from his forehead, despite the cold night air. "That would be very kind, thank you," he replied. As Emma stepped out to hand him the water bottle, Marcus noticed something unusual. Under the glow of the streetlight, her skin seemed to have a strange silvery sheen to it, almost like the surface of a pearl. He blinked a few times, thinking it must be a trick of the light, or perhaps the reflection from her shiny silver coat. Taking a break from the tire change, Marcus stood up and accepted the water bottle. As their hands briefly touched during the exchange, he felt an odd tingling sensation, like a mild static shock. Emma quickly pulled her hand back, adjusting her coat around her pregnant belly. "How far along are you?" Marcus asked, trying to make friendly conversation to ease the slightly awkward silence. The question seemed to catch Emma off guard for a moment, her hand moving protectively over her belly. 7 months, she answered, then added with a slight hesitation, "It's my first." Marcus nodded and shared that his sister had recently had a baby too. As they talked, he noticed more unusual things about Emma. Her eyes seemed to change color slightly depending on how the light hit them, shifting between blue and silver. The effect was subtle enough that most people probably wouldn't notice, but Marcus's engineer's eye for detail caught the inconsistency. Getting back to work on the tire, Marcus asked Emma where she was headed. "A medical conference," she replied, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't quite place. "I'm a researcher in advanced medical technologies." This caught Marcus's attention. His firm had recently started working on some medical equipment projects. "That's interesting," he said, working on securing the spare tire. "I actually just finished designing some components for a new type of MRI machine. The technology is fascinating." Emma's eyes lit up at this, literally seeming to glow for a split second, though Marcus told himself it must have been another reflection from passing car lights. As they discussed medical technology, Marcus noticed that Emma spoke with incredible knowledge about subjects that seemed far beyond current medical capabilities. She talked about cellular regeneration and genetic modification as if they were everyday procedures, then quickly changed the subject when Marcus asked for more details. The spare tire was almost secured when Emma's watch began to make a soft humming sound. She quickly covered it with her sleeve, but not before Marcus saw that it didn't look like any watch he'd ever seen before. Instead of a normal face, it seemed to have a shifting holographic display that emitted a faint bluish light. "You're very kind to help a stranger at this hour," Emma said, clearly trying to redirect his attention. "Most people just drove past. Weren't you afraid I might be dangerous?" There was something odd about the way she asked this, as if she was conducting some sort of test. Marcus chuckled as he tightened the last lug nut. "My mother always taught me to help people in need. Besides, you looked more scared of me than I was of you." He stood up, dusting off his hands on his jeans. "Life's too short to let fear stop you from doing what's right." Emma studied him intently, and for a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something move beneath the surface of her skin, like ripples on a pond. But before he could process what he was seeing, she smiled warmly, and the effect vanished. "Your mother taught you well, Marcus Johnson," she said, using his full name even though he hadn't told it to her. Marcus stood back to admire his work on the spare tire, giving it one final check to ensure everything was secure. The night had grown colder, and his breath formed small clouds in the air. He was about to tell Emma that everything was ready when her watch started to change. The strange device on her wrist, which he had noticed earlier, began pulsing with a bright blue light. The light grew stronger, casting weird shadows on the highway around them. Marcus took a step back, his mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The light wasn't just coming from her watch anymore. It seemed to be spreading across Emma's skin. "Marcus Johnson," Emma said, her voice changing to sound like several people speaking at once. "You have passed our test." The silvery sheen he had noticed earlier now covered her entire body, making her look like a statue made of liquid mercury. Her eyes, which had seemed odd before, now glowed with an inner light, shifting through colors like an aurora in the night sky. Marcus found himself frozen in place, not from fear, but from pure amazement. The pregnant belly that had made Emma look so vulnerable earlier now glowed with complex patterns of light, revealing itself to be some kind of advanced technology rather than a real pregnancy. I don't understand," Marcus managed to say, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He looked around quickly, but the highway remained empty. No other cars passed by, and he realized he couldn't even hear the usual distant traffic sounds anymore. It was as if he and Emma were in their own bubble of reality. Emma, or whatever she really was, raised her hand, and a soft field of light surrounded them both. "Please don't be afraid," she said, her voice returning to something closer to normal, though it now had a musical quality to it. "We have been watching humanity for a very long time, looking for people like you." The air around them filled with tiny points of light, like stars floating in the space between them. Each point expanded into a small hologram, showing different scenes. Marcus helping an elderly neighbor with groceries last week, staying late at work to help a colleague finish an important project, volunteering at the local shelter during Christmas. "These are just a few moments we have observed," Emma explained, gesturing at the floating images. "Your species is young, and many of you still act out of fear or hatred. But some, like you, show us what humanity could become." Marcus found his voice again, his engineering mind already trying to understand what he was seeing. "You're not human," he said, stating the obvious. "Are you aliens?" The word felt strange coming out of his mouth, like something from a movie rather than real life. Emma smiled, and her face shifted slightly, becoming less human while somehow remaining beautiful. "We are travelers, observers, guardians in a way. We seek out those who show true kindness without expecting anything in return. Your planet is approaching a crucial moment in its history, and people like you will be essential for what comes next." The fake pregnancy device on her body dissolved into points of light, revealing her true form to be taller and more ethereal than her human disguise. The flat tire was a test, one of many we conduct. We needed to see how you would react to someone vulnerable needing help, especially late at night, when it would be easy to just drive by. Marcus looked at the tire he had just changed, then back at Emma. "All this, just to test if I would help someone." He shook his head, trying to process everything. "But why me? I'm just an engineer. I'm nobody special." "That's exactly why you're special, Marcus Johnson," Emma said, reaching out to touch his shoulder. Where her hand made contact, warmth spread through his body. "You help others not because you are special, but because you believe helping others is the right thing to do. Such pure intention is rare and precious." The lights around them pulsed brighter, and Marcus felt a strange sensation, as if the air itself was filled with energy. Emma's form became even more radiant, and when she spoke again, her words seemed to echo in his mind, as well as his ears. "Now we have something important to show you, something that could change everything." The light bubble around Marcus and Emma grew larger, creating a space that seemed to exist somewhere between reality and dreams. The cold night air was replaced by a comfortable warmth, and the hard highway asphalt under their feet transformed into a softly glowing surface. "What I'm about to show you," Emma said, her form now fully revealed in its alien beauty, "has never been shown to a human before." She waved her hand, and the space around them filled with images of stars, planets, and galaxies. Marcus felt like he was floating in space, though he could still feel solid ground beneath his feet. "Our civilization has existed for over 50,000 of your Earth years," Emma explained, her voice gentle as she watched Marcus take in the incredible sight. "We have watched many worlds grow, some flourish, and others destroy themselves. Earth is at a turning point, much like we once were." The images around them changed to show Earth, but from angles Marcus had never seen in any NASA photos. He saw his planet's beauty, but also its problems. Melting ice caps, polluted cities, and areas destroyed by war. Yet among these troubling scenes, there were also images of people helping each other, rebuilding after disasters, and working together to solve problems. Your world faces many challenges, Emma continued, pointing to different images as they floated by. Climate change, disease, conflict, and resource depletion. But you also have something special, something we've seen in few other civilizations. The images shifted to show more scenes of human kindness, people from different countries working together after earthquakes, scientists sharing discoveries freely, strangers helping strangers. Marcus watched in amazement as more scenes played out around him. "What makes us special?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The engineer in him was trying to understand how this technology worked, while the human in him was simply overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. Emma's form shifted, creating patterns of light that seemed to dance around her. "Hope," she said simply. "Even in your darkest moments, humans can still choose to be kind. You still help others even when there's nothing to gain. Like you did tonight, Marcus." The scene changed again, showing Marcus from different angles as he stopped to help with the tire. "We've been conducting these tests all over your planet," Emma explained, "looking for people who showed genuine kindness without expecting rewards. People who could help guide humanity when the time comes for first contact." "First contact," Marcus repeated, his mind racing with the implications. "You mean, your people want to meet us officially?" Emma nodded, her movement leaving trails of light in the air. "Within the next few years, your scientists will make discoveries that will lead to official first contact. When that happens, Earth will need people who can help others understand that different doesn't mean dangerous. People who can show others how to react with kindness instead of fear." The space around them began to show scenes from what looked like other worlds, alien cities where different species lived and worked together in harmony. "We've helped other civilizations make this transition," Emma said. "Some succeed, some fail. The difference often comes down to people like you, Marcus. People who can lead by example." Marcus watched the scenes with growing understanding. "So this wasn't just about changing a tire," he said slowly. "You were looking for ambassadors. People who could help when your people finally reveal themselves." Emma's form brightened slightly, like a smile made of light. "More than ambassadors. We're looking for bridges, people who can connect different worlds through simple acts of kindness. Your species has great potential, but also great challenges ahead. The way you treat strangers today shows us how you might treat alien species tomorrow." The light bubble around them pulsed gently, and Emma turned to face Marcus directly. "Which is why we have something to offer you, Marcus Johnson. Something that could help your world prepare for what's coming." The space around Marcus and Emma changed again, the stars and planets fading away to be replaced by something that looked like a highly advanced laboratory. Holographic images of human DNA strands floated in the air, spinning slowly alongside complex molecular structures that Marcus had never seen before. "What I'm about to give you," Emma said, her silvery form moving through the floating images, "is both a gift and a responsibility." She held out her hand, and a small crystal began to form in her palm. It grew from nothing, building itself layer by layer until it was about the size of a thumb drive. The crystal glowed with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with Emma's own luminescence. Marcus stared at the crystal, his engineering mind trying to understand how something so small could form out of thin air. "What is it?" he asked, resisting the urge to reach out and touch it. The crystal seemed to respond to his voice, its light pulsing brighter for a moment. "This crystal contains medical knowledge from our civilization," Emma explained. She gestured, and the floating images changed to show various human diseases and their effects. "Your people suffer from many illnesses that we solved thousands of years ago. Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease. We have found ways to cure them all." Marcus's heart began to beat faster as he understood what she was saying. You're giving us the cures. Just like that. His voice was filled with both hope and disbelief. Years of watching loved ones suffer from disease had taught him how much such knowledge would mean to humanity. Emma's form shifted, her expression becoming more serious. "Not exactly," she said. "We cannot simply give you all the cures at once. Your society isn't ready for such a dramatic change. Instead, this crystal contains the knowledge in a form that will help you make the discoveries gradually, in a way your world can accept." She held the crystal out to Marcus. As he took it, he felt a warm, tingling sensation spread up his arm. The crystal seemed to bond with his touch, its light matching his heartbeat. "The crystal will work with your mind," Emma explained. "When you're working in your lab or designing new medical equipment, it will guide you toward the right paths. The discoveries will seem to come from your own research and experiments." Marcus looked at the small crystal in his hand, its weight seemingly impossible light for something that contained so much knowledge. "But why me?" he asked. "I'm an engineer, not a medical researcher. Wouldn't this be better in the hands of a doctor or a scientist?" Emma moved closer, her light casting gentle shadows around them. "You were chosen precisely because you're an engineer. Your work with medical equipment gives you the perfect cover for introducing these advances gradually. And more importantly, you have shown that you can be trusted to use this knowledge wisely." The holographic images around them changed again, showing possible futures. In one scene, Marcus was receiving an award for medical innovation. In another, he was working with a team of researchers, guiding them toward breakthroughs that would save millions of lives. "The crystal will help you understand which discoveries to release and when," Emma continued. "It's programmed to work with Earth's current level of technology, ensuring that each advance seems like a natural progression rather than an impossible leap." Marcus held the crystal up to the light, watching how it seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its structure. "How long?" he asked. "How long will it take to release all this knowledge?" "Years," Emma replied. "Perhaps decades, but each discovery will save lives and move your civilization closer to being ready for contact with ours." She placed her hand over the crystal, and it briefly glowed brighter. "The crystal will also protect itself. To anyone else, it will appear to be a simple piece of quartz. Only you will be able to access its true nature." The crystal in Marcus's hand pulsed with a soft blue light as Emma's form shifted, becoming more serious. The space around them changed again, this time showing two distinct paths that stretched out before them like glowing roads into the future. "Now comes the most important part," Emma said, her voice carrying a weight that made Marcus pay close attention. "You must choose how to use this gift. There are two paths before you, and each has its own consequences." She gestured to the path on the left, and images began to form. Marcus saw himself working late in his lab, making small but significant discoveries. He saw papers being published, patents being filed, and gradual progress being made in medical science. "This is the path of patience," Emma explained. "You would work within the system, introducing advances slowly over many years. Each discovery would seem natural, a product of human innovation." The right path lit up next, showing very different scenes. Marcus saw himself holding press conferences, showing the crystal to the world, telling everyone about his encounter on the highway. There were scenes of excitement, of hope, but also of chaos. "This is the path of revelation," Emma said. "You could tell the world about us, about this gift. It would bring immediate hope to millions." Marcus studied both paths carefully, his mind working through the implications. "What would happen if I chose to reveal everything?" he asked, watching the scenes play out along the right-hand path. Emma waved her hand, and the scenes shifted to show potential consequences. There were images of panic in some cities, religious upheaval in others. Military vehicles surrounded research facilities, and Marcus saw himself being taken away by government agents. "Some would believe you," Emma said. "Others would call you crazy. Governments would fight to control the crystal. The knowledge might still get out, but the chaos could delay progress for years." The scenes along the left path continued to play out, showing a more stable but slower progression. "And if I keep it secret?" Marcus asked, watching himself age in the images, making discovery after discovery over many years. "Progress would be slower," Emma admitted, "but each advance would be accepted and integrated into your society naturally. You would still face challenges, other scientists questioning your methods, competitors trying to duplicate your work. But the changes would be stable, permanent." Marcus looked down at the crystal in his hand, feeling its warmth. "Would I be alone?" he asked quietly. "Would I have to keep this secret from everyone?" Emma's form softened slightly, showing what looked like compassion. "There are others like you," she revealed. "Not many, but they exist around the world. Each has their own task, their own way of helping humanity progress. In time, you might meet some of them. But for now, yes, this must remain your secret." The space around them shifted again, returning to the bubble of light beside the highway. The cars were still frozen in the distance, time apparently standing still outside their private space. Marcus could see his own car, the hazard lights still blinking, and Emma's car with its newly changed tire. "You have until sunrise to decide," Emma said gently. "The crystal will remain inactive until you make your choice. Once you decide, there's no going back. If you choose not to accept this responsibility, simply leave the crystal on the highway. It will dissolve with the morning dew, and you can go back to your normal life. No one will ever know about tonight." Marcus stared at the small crystal that held such enormous potential. He thought about his mother's words about helping others, about all the people suffering in hospitals who could be helped by this knowledge. He thought about the responsibility of keeping such a huge secret, and about how his life would change, no matter which path he chose. 10 years had passed since that strange night on the highway. Marcus sat in his office at Johnson Medical Innovations, looking out over the city as the sun set. The crystal, now set in a simple silver pendant around his neck, pulsed softly with his heartbeat, just as it had done every day since he made his choice. He had chosen the path of patience, understanding that real change needed time to take root. The morning after his encounter with Emma, he had walked into his engineering firm and started making subtle changes to his medical equipment designs. Within a year, his improvements to MRI machines had earned him his first patent. 2 years later, he had started his own company. The crystal had guided him just as Emma had promised. Sometimes, while working late at night, solutions would appear in his mind like memories he didn't know he had. Each breakthrough seemed to build naturally on existing technology, making the advances believable to the scientific community. His modifications to cancer treatment machines had increased survival rates by 40%. His improvements to heart monitors had made early detection so accurate that preventive treatment had become the norm rather than the exception. Marcus picked up the framed photograph on his desk, showing him with a group of children at St. Mary's Hospital. They were all smiling, all healthy, all saved by the treatments his company had developed. He remembered how sick they had been before the new treatments, how their parents had cried with joy when the diseases went into remission. The door to his office opened, and his assistant poked her head in. "Dr. Johnson, they're ready for you in the conference room." Marcus smiled and nodded. Today was another big day. They were announcing a new treatment for Alzheimer's disease that would stop its progression completely. The crystal had been particularly active lately, suggesting that humanity was ready for this next step. As he walked to the conference room, Marcus passed the wall of headlines that tracked his company's achievements. Johnson Medical Innovations revolutionizes cancer treatment. Breakthrough in heart disease prevention. Medical pioneer wins Nobel Prize. He had donated most of the prize money to research hospitals around the world. Sometimes at night, Marcus would look up at the stars and think about Emma. He hadn't seen her since that night, but he knew she or others like her were watching. Occasionally, he would catch glimpses of silvery skin or color-shifting eyes in crowds, but they would always vanish when he looked closer. He wasn't alone, though. Over the years, he had met others. A geneticist in Japan, a neurologist in Brazil, a quantum physicist in Kenya. None of them spoke directly about their gifts, but they all wore similar crystals, and they all understood the importance of patience and gradual progress. Entering the conference room, Marcus saw the usual crowd of reporters and medical professionals. But today, at the back of the room, he spotted someone different. A pregnant woman in a silver coat stood quietly watching him, her eyes seeming to shift color under the fluorescent lights. She smiled slightly and nodded, then disappeared into the crowd. Marcus touched the crystal at his neck and felt its warmth. The choice he had made that night had changed everything, not just for him, but for millions of people around the world. Yet the biggest changes were still to come. Humanity was getting closer to being ready for what Emma's people would reveal. Each cure, each breakthrough, each small step forward was preparing Earth for a future bigger than most people could imagine. As he stepped up to the podium to announce his latest breakthrough, Marcus thought about what his mother had taught him about helping others. She had been right. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about making the world better, one small act of kindness at a time. Even if that act was just stopping to help a stranger change a tire on a dark highway.